Hey everybody out there, this is Mama G, Mama G's YouTube channel. It started out as a distance learning channel for my students at Lima Christian School. Hi you guys, I love you. But I thought I would just share some stuff that other people could use too. So today what I want to show you is I was checking around, since I have a lot of time right now doing distance learning here. I was checking in my supplies and organizing them, and I found this general sketch and wash brush that I had never used before. Probably got it from a kit, maybe from Art Snacks or something like that. Not really sure, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this out. So what I did was I looked up a picture from one of my awesome photographers that I follow on Instagram. This one is at Wilderness Echo. And although this says reference photo, this isn't the reference photo itself. The reference photo is on my iPad, but I was using that to create this. So she had this cute little otter. So what I did was I completed one, and I just thought I would do one for you guys and show you how this sketch and wash works. This is pretty cool. All you're gonna need is a piece of, I use watercolor paper. You don't have to, but it's a lot better because we're adding some wet to a medium or to a substrate, which is our paper, that if we don't have some sort of watercolor paper and just have regular paper, it's gonna buckle and do all kinds of stuff. So it's not a big drawing, so I didn't worry about trying to stretch it or anything like that, the watercolor paper. So here we go. I've already traced it onto here, but I'll just show you my approach to this, and I'm sure you guys will have different ones too. So if I take a look at this with my pencil, probably should be a little sharper, what I did first is just filled in the areas that I knew were going to be darkest, pretty much wanted to look black. Not pushing hard, it's a pretty soft pencil. So that is the first thing I did, is find the areas that I knew were gonna need the most lead on them, okay? So I'll put that in there. I found this. When I did this picture and I looked at the reference photo, I tried to keep it, I simplified it. Obviously the otter had a lot of really cool wet hair and stuff. To try to get the idea of that, I just looked at, okay, what's the darkest and how do I make it look like the other areas are shiny? And that's to leave them white without anything on them. So focus on first the darks, not pressing hard at all, putting those on. He had a little dark here. He had some dark under his paws right here, so I made sure I put that in. A little bit in between his toes. And then in a moment here, I'm gonna go ahead and use just a little bit of water. You don't need a lot because it's a small painting. And there's small areas, I'm gonna use a small brush. So I always tell my students, okay, how do you select the right brush? Well, first you have to figure out what brush for the medium that you're using. The medium is, what are you creating it with? This right here is almost like a watercolor pencil. And so I'm gonna use a watercolor brush with it, but I also wanna make sure it's really fine and small because the areas that I'm doing are going to be small and I need a little bit of control here. Okay, so those are really my dark areas. Then there was one up here that was kind of creating a look of a wave or something going on. So it was a little under here and some up in here and a little bit under this, which was a wave also. So you can see I'm doing what I call a little bit of a skip. So I'm adding some of this value on, and then there's other areas that I barely put any on. It's almost like what we call a lost and found line. Now I'm going to go to my medium values. So I need something up here to separate this wave from the background because my background right now is white. And so I'm going to add a value, so I'm not pushing quite as hard on the pencil, even though I didn't push that hard anyways. Just pushing just a little bit here and doing some little areas that I saw in the water that had some dark or medium values. This is kind of his belly right here, so I'm going to add just a little bit in there. I know I'm going to need some on the sides here so I can separate them from the water, so I'm going to add just a little bit. You can see I'm not filling in the white at all. Some of it I'm leaving alone. Around his little eyes here, I'm going to leave a little. I'm just doing it nice and light. I'm even going to skip the top part of his head here. Do this over here. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit here under his nose, but his nose also has some darker value inside here. So once I get this part done, then I'm ready to start with my pencil or with my paintbrush and getting some water moving on. So it's just a regular paintbrush here. This one is a Cotman number 4 by Winsor Newton. I'm just using some clean water, and I'm going to really carefully just go into the areas I wanted darkest right from the beginning. So there's his eyeball. I'm really carefully doing his eyeball right now. Just going to leave that alone. His little nostrils. So I'm not trying to spread this right now because those areas need to be contained. This one down here, when I do this dark shade, it breaks into some other areas. It's sharp against his feet, so I'm going to be really careful against his little paws. But then when it goes out to the side of him over here, he was furry, so I'm going to do these little strokes that kind of break into his side over here as little furry stripes. I just cleaned my brush because now I want to go in here and I want to drag some value, which is what's light or dark. So I want to drag a little bit of this, but I don't want it to be totally dark. So I did wash my brush out a little bit just so it wouldn't be full of that dark value that I had. So I'm washing it out, getting some of the extra water off of it. And now I'm going to pull that around to the side here. So I stayed right within that. Now I'm washing my brush to get rid of some of that so that when I pull it, it doesn't totally fill in all my white. So that's why a lot of times I'll be dipping my brush before I move on to the next part, because I don't want to have a dirty brush that already has a bunch of stuff in it. I want to just drag a little bit of value. So I've got that there. Now the part in his little paws, that has to really stay contained too. So I have to be very careful when I do this between his little paw feet here. And it goes actually up against his little belly. That's what's in front of him right there. So I have to be careful too not to get that into his belly. Otherwise it's not going to look like they're behind it. So I've got that right there. All right, we got his little ears. Let's get those in. And now he's pretty much done except for his head. So now his head, what I'm going to do, I want the look that he's got these little areas that kind of pop up around his eyes. So I'm going to leave that white around there. That shows that there's some skin around there or some anatomy that's kind of sticking up. I'm going to leave the very top of his head white. That's going to look like there's a little reflection on there, a little highlight. Plus that's kind of how it looked in my picture. I'm going to drag this down here. Okay, dipping that brush always, kind of cleaning it off, make sure, because down here I need to have enough so hopefully I can get his whiskers to show. In my little sample here, I did it, and then I took and tried a paint pen, acrylic paint pen to do his whiskers. That didn't work. I think it's because it's too wet. And then I tried, I don't know, I tried 2 or 3 things and none of them really worked. I tried one of the gel pens, but I think it was just too wet. So we'll see what happens on this one. There's that little dark spot on his nose. Now I don't want his nose to be white, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag around a little bit of the value, and if my nose gets too light, I'm going to show you what I can do. Okay, under here, I'm going to break some of that up a little bit just by going over it, but just know if you go over an area that you've already, and you want it to be dark and you go over it with water, you're going to lift some of that value, so you're going to lose some of it too, so be careful not to lose that value. Okay, so I'm liking how he is pretty much, except for I need to get his little tootsies in to make him look a little more rounded. So I'm just going to drag a little value here and there, a little bit right above this, and a little bit here. That just gives that little rounded look of his little hands. This one over here, there's just a little bit kind of on the side. And now for the water. So for the water, I'm almost like I was doing with adding the color on, adding the value. I'm doing a skip. I'm not going over the whole thing. I am letting my brush kind of skip around a little bit so it creates light areas and medium areas and leaves some areas alone. This one separates it from that wave that's in front, so I really want to get that going. But you can see this area right here is a harsh line. Get some water on it right away. Break that up. We don't want a harsh line there. We just want a suggestion. And got that water going there. Kind of let it trail off the page. Okay. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to get this front area, and I want it to look like he's got some little bubbly waves in front of him. So this underneath here, becomes the shadow of that little wave that's created. And then I don't want all of this left alone. I need to make this look like it has a little bit of value in it. So I can come and I can either steal some value from an area that was pretty dark and I needed lighter, or I can go back in now with my pencil if I want a little bit. Now the warning is, if you put water on here and then you touch it with this pencil, that value is going to be really dark, because if you add it wet, the dry to the wet, the dry pencil to the wet, it's the watercolor paper is going to activate that pencil. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit more value under his nose. So I want his nose to pop out a little bit, and a little bit more off on the sides here to give that more of a rounded. So right now I am adding this to the wet paper, but it's dried a little bit. So that's why it's not pulling it out and making it really dark right there. Otherwise I could be in some trouble. So I got a little bit more on there. I'm going to soften that. Like my little otter. It's looking cute. So that's a pretty quick little otter here. And then all I wanted to do after, oh, I remember too. So the white around his eyes I didn't want totally white. So I went back in with just a clean brush and added just a little bit of water to make that move around a little bit for me. Okay, so there's my little guy right now. If I want, I can go back in and add darks, but I kind of like him. He's a cutie. So at this point, I can either dry him and try to add the lights in for his whiskers and the highlights in his eyes. I am going to try right now, if I can find that gel pen. See if I can get a gel pen to work for me to show you this here. So, oh, that one doesn't want to work. See if I can find another one. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Okay, here we go. There we go. So we can add his little highlights on his eyes right there, and let's give him his little whiskers. Oh, see, that doesn't want to work there because it's so wet. So probably if I let this dry, it'll work a little better. Let's try it on this guy. He's dried a little bit more now. Not sure if it's working. Yeah, it's working a little bit better. Not too much better though. Maybe I'll go back in with some acrylic paint on a really small, fine brush and then put it in with that. I think that'll work better. But there you have it. Again, that is, I'm going to sign it with a pencil so it doesn't smudge. That is the General's Sketch and Wash brush, and it says it's number 588. Have fun with that, and if you guys get a chance, show me what you've done. But again, thank you at Wilderness Echo. Amazing, amazing photos. You guys all love them. However, if you want to use anybody's photos that you see on Instagram or any place else, remember, they don't belong to you. They belong to the photographer. They're the artist, and so you need to ask for permission. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not, but you need to be responsible and ask for permission. Thanks, guys. See you later.